Mark sat on the front porch of their small but cozy house in Connecticut, sipping his evening coffee. The autumn breeze rustled the golden leaves of the old oak tree in their yard. He had always loved this time of year. Calm, predictable, comforting, unlike his marriage lately. Inside, Linda was flipping through a home decor magazine, circling furniture pieces she wanted to buy. The excitement in her eyes made Mark sigh. She had been like this for years, spontaneous, full of energy, and a little too quick to spend money. At 54, Mark was the practical one, a man who had worked as an engineer for over 30 years and meticulously planned their finances for retirement. Linda, on the other hand, had worked as an event planner and had always believed in living life in the moment. She wasn't reckless, but her definition of reasonable spending had always been different from his. "Mark, look at this," she said, walking over with the magazine. "Wouldn't this dining set look perfect in our home? It's on sale for only $2,500. Mark frowned, setting his coffee down. "We just bought a new dining set 5 years ago, Linda. What's wrong with the one we have?" She sighed, clearly frustrated. "It's outdated. Plus, we hardly ever do anything fun anymore. Can't we enjoy what we've worked for?" Mark leaned back, rubbing his temples. "Enjoying life doesn't mean spending money we don't need to spend. We're about to retire. We should be saving more, not redecorating the house." Linda's expression shifted. It was the same old argument, the same wall between them that seemed to get higher with each passing year. Linda wasn't oblivious to Mark's concerns. She knew he worried about their future, about making sure they wouldn't run out of money. But she also worried about feeling stuck in a life that had become routine, about getting older and not having anything to look forward to. She remembered when they were younger. Mark had been so adventurous. They used to travel, go on spontaneous road trips, eat at new restaurants without overanalyzing the cost. But somewhere along the way, his sense of adventure had been replaced by financial caution. That night, she sat at the kitchen table, flipping through their bank statements. She wasn't reckless, was she? Yes, she enjoyed shopping, but it wasn't just about the things. It was about feeling alive. She thought about their friend Susan, whose husband had passed away suddenly last year. They had spent years saving, planning for retirement, and then he was gone before they could enjoy it. What was the point of all that careful planning if you never got to live? Mark, meanwhile, lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. He wasn't trying to control Linda, but the stress of their finances was weighing on him. He worried about the economy, about healthcare costs, about whether they'd have enough to last them through their later years. How had they ended up here? The tension simmered for days. Then, one Saturday afternoon, it erupted. Mark had been reviewing their bank statements when he noticed another charge from an upscale boutique. "Linda," he called from his desk, his voice sharper than he intended. "Can you come here for a second?" She walked into the room, already knowing what this was about. "What?" "You spent $300 at that boutique last week, after we just talked about cutting back." She crossed her arms. "It was a special sale. I saved more than I spent." Mark scoffed. "That's not how saving works, Linda. We need to be careful. We have to think about our future." Linda threw her hands in the air. "I am thinking about our future, Mark, but I also think about our present. You act like we're already in a nursing home counting pennies." Mark shook his head. "I just don't want us to end up struggling because we didn't make smart choices now." "Smart choices? You mean your choices?" she snapped. Every decision we make is based on your fear of running out of money. But what about my fear? What if we wait too long to enjoy life and then it's too late? Silence fell between them. The truth was, they were both scared, just in different ways. The fight lingered in the air for days. Then came the call that changed everything. Linda's younger brother, David, had suffered a heart attack. He was only 52. The news hit like a truck. David had always been the picture of health, fit, active, full of life. And yet, there he was, lying in a hospital bed, tubes attached to his arms, his face pale and exhausted. Mark and Linda sat together in the waiting room, shaken. "Life is so damn short," Linda whispered, staring at the tiled floor. Mark swallowed hard. "Yeah, it is." On the drive home, they didn't speak much, but something had shifted. That night, Mark reached for Linda's hand in bed. "I don't want to fight about money anymore," he said softly. Linda squeezed his fingers. "Me neither." They lay in the quiet for a long time, both realizing that their arguments weren't really about money. They were about the fear of time slipping away. The next morning, over coffee, Linda pulled out a notebook. "I have an idea." Mark raised an eyebrow. "That's usually dangerous." She smirked but continued. "Let's create 2 lists. One for things we must do, like saving for medical costs and security, and one for things we want to do, like travel and experiences. And we set a monthly budget for personal spending. No judgment, no resentment." Mark considered it. "A fun fund for each of us." "Exactly. That way, if I want a new coat, I don't have to feel guilty. And if you want to splurge on some fancy tech gadget, you don't have to hear me nag about it." It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. Over the next few months, they worked together. Linda curbed her impulse buys, learning to pause before making purchases. Mark relaxed a little, learning that not every dollar needed to be tucked away in savings. And then, one evening, Linda surprised Mark with something. "Remember that trip to Italy we always talked about?" she said, sliding a travel brochure across the table. Mark hesitated. "Can we afford it?" Linda smiled. "Yes, we planned for it." They took that trip. They walked through the streets of Rome, ate pasta in a tiny family-owned restaurant, stood hand in hand in front of the Colosseum. One evening, as they watched the sun set over the Tuscan hills, Mark turned to Linda and said, "I have to admit, that coat looks great on you." She laughed, squeezing his hand. "And I have to admit, it feels nice knowing we're securing our future together and enjoying our lives." Marriage wasn't about winning or losing arguments. It was about learning, adapting, and finding a balance between security and joy. For the first time in years, they felt like partners again. And for once, neither of them was worried about the cost of happiness.